All the guys on campus said the Ice Queen was trying to get with me. Every morning, she brought me breakfast right on time. Every late-night study session, she'd take the seat directly across from me in the library. She even used my meal card to pay for her food in the dining hall. It wasn't until I saw the strategy checklist in her notebook that I understood. 1. Initiate physical contact 100 times square root. 2. Make him accustomed to my presence square root. 3. Achieve a heart rate exceeding 180 BPM during the confession square root. I pressed my hand over hers as she tried to take my pulse. Let's just skip to the final mission. What's your heart rate right now? Her face flushed as she poked me in the chest. Right here. You're breaking the speed limit. When it was lunchtime in the main dining hall, my roommate, Mac, and I were tearing into some buffalo wings. Suddenly, he jabbed me in the ribs. Dude, look, you're 3 o'clock. I turned my head. Clara Thompson was sitting there. The Clara Thompson. She wasn't eating. She was just staring straight at me. It was the kind of look a scientist gives a weird new specimen. A look so sharp it felt like it could cut glass. I nearly choked on a wing. She's been staring at you for 10 minutes, man, Mac whispered. You two have beef or something. I started shoveling fries into my mouth. I don't even know what side of campus her dorm is on. Then, she's into you. Mac's expression turned even more bizarre. No way in hell. I shot back, nearly dropping my tray. My name is Leo Hayes. I'm a junior in the computer science department. I'm 5'9" on a good day, with a face that would get lost in a crowd of 2. If you threw me into the humanities building, where all the campus beauties seem to live, I wouldn't even qualify as a background character. Clara Thompson looking at me. It was absurd. She had to have me confused with someone else. With my last shred of composure, I pulled out my phone. It took me 3 tries to get the Face ID to work. I was about to open the camera to check if I had sauce on my face when a text from an unknown number popped up. The message was brutally simple. This is Clara Thompson. Add this number. My heart just about stopped. I snapped my head up. Clara was already on her feet, carrying a tray with her barely touched food. She walked toward the dish return, her expression a perfect blank. All she left behind was a tall, cool silhouette and the faint, clean scent of her perfume in the air. My thumb was frozen over the screen. Mac leaned in for a look. He turned to stone. Holy crap, for I didn't hear a single word of my 2 afternoon classes. My phone sat in my lap under the desk. That number was still in my contacts, waiting to be added, looking like a ticking time bomb. Add her. The motive was way too suspicious. Don't add her. The consequences could be even worse. When the final bell rang, I took a deep breath and mashed the add contact button. She accepted the request instantly, as if she'd been waiting for it. The top of the chat window immediately changed to Clara is typing. I held my breath. A single message appeared. Leo Hayes? Yeah. Is there something you need? Yes. A small favor. 5 minutes later, I was standing in front of the impressive, ivy-covered humanities building, my insides doing gymnastics. Clara pushed through the heavy oak doors. She was wearing a simple white blouse and crisp blue jeans, holding a massive stack of hardcover binders. It was a stack thick enough to crush a small animal. Here, she said, walking right up to me. She shoved the binders into my arms. My knees buckled for a second. Help me carry these to the Student Activities Center, room A109, 3rd floor. Her words were fast, efficient. Not a single one wasted. Okay, I grunted, struggling to keep the mountain of paper from toppling over. She turned and started walking, her ponytail swinging in a perfect arc behind her. Not a word of thanks. Not even a spare glance. I felt like a hired mover, my mind a complete blur as I followed her across half the campus. 6, we made it to the 3rd floor conference room. I dropped the binders onto a high shelf with a loud thud. My shoulders ached. Clara stood by the window, sipping from a bottle of water. The sunlight perfectly framed the elegant line of her jaw. Done, she said, putting the bottle down. So, I'll just go then, I asked, testing the waters. My bank account was flashing red. If I didn't make it to the dining hall for the discounted late-night special, I was going to starve. She suddenly turned her head, her dark eyes locking onto me. 7 o'clock tonight. East Campus Library. 3rd floor, the tables by the windows. It was an order, not a request. I was completely lost. Save me a seat, she said with a slight tilt of her head. It gets too crowded. I don't like fighting for a spot. Oh, my body responded before my brain could process it. It wasn't until I was standing in the packed library at 7 p.m., fending off dirty looks while guarding a single empty table by the window, that I finally asked myself, what the hell does Clara Thompson want with me? 7:10 p.m., Clara appeared, right on schedule. She wore a cream-colored knit sweater. She carried only one book, a notebook, and a single pen. She flipped through the pages silently. She sat down across the wide table from me, as quiet and composed as a figure in a painting. We sat there, separated by 3 feet of polished wood, each with our own textbooks and assignments. No one spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the air conditioning, the occasional rustle of a turning page, and the faint scratching of a pen on paper. It stayed that way until the library's closing announcement played over the speakers. She closed her book and packed her bag with practiced efficiency. Leaving, she said, standing up. "Oh," I replied, scrambling to gather my scattered calculus worksheets. We walked out into the cool night air. Under a lamppost, she paused briefly. "See you tomorrow." Before I could even process it, she turned and walked off toward the women's dorms, a completely different direction from mine. I just stood there as the night wind rustled the leaves above me. "See you tomorrow." What did she mean? 8 the next morning at 7 a.m. sharp, a violent pounding on my door woke me from a dead sleep. "Leo, get your ass out here, man." Mac yelled from the hallway. I stumbled to the door, my hair a tangled mess. Mac was standing there with a bagel in one hand and a coffee in the other, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Downstairs, now. The high and mighty Clara Thompson is asking for you." I ran so fast when my slippers flew off. I burst through the main doors of the dorm, and there she was. In the pale morning light, Clara was standing there in a clean white tracksuit, her hair pulled back in a high ponytail. At her feet was a huge, bulging grocery bag. Every guy walking past was doing a double take. "Morning," I said, my throat suddenly dry. "Morning." She bent down, picked up the heavy bag, and pushed it into my hands. "Here." The bag was heavy. I instinctively looked inside. It was packed. Cartons of milk, loaves of bread, several different kinds of sandwiches, apples, bananas. There was even a small, perfectly arranged container of washed strawberries. For me, I was pretty sure I was still dreaming. "Yes," she nodded. "Why?" I finally asked the million-dollar question. "Just take it," she said, her expression unchanged, but her tone was like someone calming down a confused puppy. "I'm going." And just like that, she turned and walked away. I stood there like a statue, holding a bag full of breakfast. I made my way back to the room amidst a chorus of howls from Mac and my other roommates. "You animal. Dude, you've been holding out on us. Spill it now." Mac tore open a sandwich and took a huge bite. "What kind of dark magic did you use on her, man?" "If I knew, I'd sell the antidote," I wailed. The days that followed were bizarrely surreal. Clara inserted herself into my schedule with the precision of a programmed robot. On Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, she delivered breakfast at 7 a.m. on the dot. There was always enough to feed my entire suite. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, it was the East Campus Library at 7 p.m. at that same table by the window. She always sat across from me. We'd study in our own worlds with almost zero communication, except for a leaving or a "see you tomorrow" when it was time to go. The weirdest part happened on Friday at dinner. I was about to swipe my student ID for the $10 fried chicken special when a hand reached past my shoulder. Beep. The crisp sound of a card being swiped. Clara's face was suddenly right there, uncomfortably close. "Borrowing your card for a second," she said, as if it were the most normal thing in the world, before pulling her own card back. She then took her tray and walked to the corner table where I usually sat. By the time I got my food and walked over, the seat across from her was empty, waiting, like it was reserved. 10. "Dude, she's totally into you, Leo, my man," Max said, stabbing his mashed potatoes with a fork, his heart clearly broken. "It couldn't be more obvious." "Into me?" I almost choked on my own spit. "I wouldn't believe that if you paid me." "What else could it be?" Max started counting on his fingers. "She brings you food. She studies with you. She pays for your dinner. It's an investment. Laying the groundwork. You get it?" He paused, though with your particular set of features. His eyes were full of doubt about my genetic potential. That's the whole problem. I was losing my mind. That night in the library, Clara was as quiet as ever. She was focused on a heavy, hardcover book with a title in a language I didn't recognize. In between wrestling with my own textbook, I stole a glance at her. She had a high, straight nose. Her eyelashes cast little shadows on her cheeks when she looked down. Her lips were thin, but perfectly shaped. Her jawline was sharp and clean. She was beautiful, no question, but she was also cold, like a precision instrument, walking around with an unspoken, intense pressure. 11. Her left hand rested on the table. Her fingers were long and slender. Her nails neatly trimmed and painted with a pale pink polish so faint you could barely see it. I found my eyes fixed on a tiny mark near the base of her ring finger. A small, light brown beauty mark. I was staring, a little lost in thought. The motion of her turning a page paused. Suddenly, she looked up. Her dark eyes met mine without warning. It felt like dropping a stone into a frozen lake. The calm, icy surface shattered. My heart seized for a second. I quickly looked down, pretending to be absorbed in a circuit diagram. I could feel my face getting hot. She didn't say anything. Her gaze seemed to linger on me for a second longer. Then, she looked back down at her book. The only sound in the air was the faint whisper of her fingertips against the page. 12. I got out of class early on Friday. Mac and I were heading back to the dorm, drenched in sweat after a game of pickup basketball, when I was stopped in my tracks. Clara was standing at the corner that led to the off-campus food truck alley. The hem of her pale green dress fluttered in the breeze. Hey, she was holding 2 printed-out sheets of paper. She handed one to me. I need you to get these. I looked down at the list. Taro Bubble Tea Light Ice, half sugar, extra Bubble Strawberry Mochi X original custard, will Cake X1 Red Bean Taiyaki X1, and so on. Below the list were the specific names and addresses of the food trucks, located in a popular pedestrian area about a mile from campus. This is a lot, I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. All of it was pure sugar. I couldn't picture her eating any of it. Yes, she nodded. Now, yes. She just stood there, looking at me, her expression calm and unyielding. I sighed and pulled out my phone to look up the directions. I appreciate it, she said suddenly, then added, make sure to get receipts. I'll Venmo you back. It's fine, I said, folding the list and stuffing into my pocket. Leaving, she said, turning on her heel with that same clean efficiency. I watched her back disappear behind the trees toward the women's dorms. Next to me, Mac was muttering to himself. Unreal. This is absolutely unreal. 13. The food truck alley was a chaotic mess of people. Every trendy spot had a ridiculously long line. After fighting my way through the crowds, sweating and getting jostled, I finally had everything on the list. I was carrying 2 heavy, greasy paper bags, feeling like I had just run a marathon with weights on. When I got back to her dorm, I sent her a text. Got it. Where are you? I can bring it up. She replied almost instantly. No need. Just leave it with the RA at the front desk. Tell him my name. Thanks for the trouble. We'll send the money later. Cold, robotic to the point. I handed the bags to the RA and gave her Clara's name. The RA, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, gave me a knowing, complicated look. Well now, you're really putting in the effort to win over our Miss Thompson, aren't you? I just gave a weak smile and practically ran back to my own dorm. Mac was waiting with a freshly washed apple. So, did she like it? Didn't even see her. Left it at the front desk, I said, collapsing into my squeaky desk chair. TSK, you think she's testing you? Mac analyzed, taking a loud crunch of his apple. To see your endurance, your ability to follow orders. I think she's training me to be her personal delivery drone, I mumbled, rubbing my aching legs. My phone buzzed. A new message. It was Clara. Thanks again. Sent the money. Are you free tomorrow evening? Here we go again. My temples started to throb. What's up? The West Side basketball courts. 14. The West Side basketball courts. 7 in the evening. I was right on time. The lights around the courts were dim. I saw Clara from a distance, wearing a light blue hoodie. She was holding a beige tote bag and sitting on an empty, tall referee's chair at the edge of the court. Her long legs were slightly bent, and she was quietly watching a group of biology majors play a pickup game. She looked completely out of place amidst the loud, chaotic energy of the court. Hey, I said, walking up to her. She turned her head, and for a split second, a strange emotion flickered in her eyes. "You're here." I had no idea what was going on. "You wanted me to watch the game with you?" "Yes," she nodded. She pointed with her chin to a spot on the ground about 10 feet away from her chair. "The item is over there." On the ground was a black backpack. It looked new. It wasn't her style. "I need you to get it for me," she said. "Get the bag." I was more confused than ever. "Correct." Her gaze drifted back to the game. "That bag." I confirmed. "Yes." I walked over and picked up the backpack. It was heavy. "Okay, got it. Now what?" But she didn't say anything else. She just sat there on her perch, staring blankly at the running, jumping figures in the distance. Several minutes passed. A few people walking by gave us curious looks. The silence was getting weird. I tried again. "Clara, this bag." She finally seemed to snap out of it. Her eyes fell lightly on the bag in my hand. "Oh, you can just put it back where you found it." Like a puppet, I walked back and placed the bag on the ground. Her eyes were fixed on my face for a few seconds, as if she were studying a difficult problem. Then she let out a soft sigh. "All right, thank you." And then, I was just standing there like an idiot. "You can go," she said, hopping gracefully off the high chair. She landed without a sound, the hood of her sweatshirt bouncing slightly. 15. "That's it. We're just leaving?" I was completely bewildered. "Yes, that's all," she said, brushing some dust off her sleeve. We walked side by side away from the dimly lit courts. She didn't walk fast, keeping about a shoulder's width of distance between us. Our long shadows stretched and shrank under the streetlights. Neither of us said a word. We walked all the way to the fork in the path where the men's and women's dorms split off. She stopped. "Tomorrow afternoon." It was another command. I was starting to get used to it. "What time?" 3 o'clock. The small auditorium in the Humanities building. "What's happening?" The Humanities department is having rehearsals for their art showcase. "They're short on stagehands," she said, hesitating for a fraction of a second. "You're strong. They need help moving set pieces. The prop boxes are heavy. Can you do it?" More heavy lifting. I could already feel a phantom ache in my shoulders. But I nodded anyway. "Sure. Thanks," she said, adding 2 extra words this time. She turned and walked toward her dorm. 16. I dragged my feet back to my room. Mac was waiting, his face alight with curiosity. "So, how was the basketball court date? Total vibe, right?" "Date my ass," I grumbled, pushing his face away. She had me go to the basketball court, pick up a bag, and then put it back down. Mac's jaw dropped. Pick up a bag, and put it back. That's it. That's it. I threw myself onto my bed. "Brilliant." Mac gave me a thumbs up, his expression growing more conspiratorial. "It's psychological warfare, my friend. To keep you guessing, to make you wonder. The mind games, man, she's playing at a whole other level." I pulled the covers over my head in despair. The next afternoon, I was backstage at the Humanities Auditorium. The narrow hallway was dimly lit and cluttered with junk. Gritting my teeth, I helped 2 other guys I didn't know haul a massive, ridiculously heavy velvet-covered set piece across the floor. My back was about to snap. A few girls in various costumes were nearby, taking inventory of props and chatting quietly. One of them kept glancing over at me. "That's him?" A girl with short hair whispered. "Uh-huh." Another one, who was wearing a pair of bunny ears, nodded. Her eyes were filled with unconcealed amusement. "Clara's taste is certainly minimalist. I heard she's been bringing him breakfast for a month. And the whole library study buddy thing, for real. You'll have to ask Clara herself," the girl with the bunny ears said, nodding toward the side. Clara was standing about 10 feet away. The cold overhead light hit the side of her face. She was holding a long clipboard in one hand and a walkie-talkie in the other, talking to the lighting technician. Her expression was focused. She didn't look my way once. She completely ignored the whispers of her friends. The girl with the short hair, apparently not ready to give up, raised her voice a little and asked casually, "Clara, is that your friend?" Clara finally looked up. Her gaze swept over me, bent over like an ox, hauling the set piece. Her tone was flat. "Yes, Leo Hayes." Not another word of introduction. No emotion at all. Then her eyes moved away just as quickly, as if I were just another piece of useful furniture backstage. She went right back to her conversation with the lighting crew. I put all my strength into moving that giant wooden panel into place. My back was soaked with sweat, and for some reason, My heart felt like it had been coated in a thin layer of dust. "Take 10, someone yelled from the control booth. I leaned against a stack of empty prop boxes, trying to catch my breath, and chug from a water bottle. A flash of pink bounced toward me. It was the girl with the bunny ears. She had a bright, overly enthusiastic smile on her face and was holding a cup of peach iced tea with a straw already in it. "Hey, you're Leo, right? Thanks so much for your help." Her smile was blinding. "This is for you." I instinctively took a step back, a little thrown by her sudden friendliness. "Thanks, but you don't have to. I have water." "Oh, don't be silly." The bunny-eared girl shoved the drink into my hand. "Our Clara is counting on you." She suddenly stood on her tiptoes and leaned in close to my ear. "Hey," she whispered conspiratorially. "Can I let you in on a little secret?" Her warm breath tickled my ear, smelling faintly of fruit candy. I was completely uncomfortable but stood frozen. "What?" Her eyes curved into mischievous crescents. Her voice dropped even lower. "You know, you're our Clara's test subject number 1. "Test subject?" I froze. That vague feeling of annoyance I'd been having was instantly replaced by curiosity. "What do you mean?" "Shoo," she said, pressing a finger to her lips and glancing over at Clara, who was now talking to the stage manager, to make sure she wasn't listening. Then she winked. "Look, our Clara is gorgeous, no doubt about it, right? But she's never actually been in a relationship. All theory, no practice. You know," she made a face. "And she's stubborn. She said she can't go into the real thing without experience, worried she'll screw it up. So she decided to find a reliable subject to practice on." She held up 3 fingers in front of my face. "It's a clear 3-step method. Step 1. Appear in the subject's life with high frequency to establish presence until it becomes routine. Step 2. Create occasional, incidental physical contact to close the physical distance and build a foundation of familiarity. And step 3. She giggled. "Well, that's the big one. Precise stimulation to push things past the breaking point, you know. Create a few heart-pounding little accidents." She patted my shoulder. "So, do a good job, okay? Don't let Clara's scientific experiment go to waste." And with that, she hopped away like a real rabbit, leaving me alone in the dim backstage light. The cold, unopened cup of iced tea was still in my hand. Condensation dripped down the side, cold and sticky against my fingers. My head was buzzing. Test subject number 1. A 3-step method, a scientific experiment. My chest felt heavy, like it was stuffed with a waterlogged cotton ball, cold, heavy, and suffocating. The noise and chaos of the backstage area seemed to be coming from behind a thick wall of glass. I looked at Clara's cool silhouette, standing in the light. The spotlight traced the line of her straight back and focused profile. She was undeniably beautiful, and I was just a component operating according to a plan, a background prop for her to record data for her practical research. Mac's thoughtless jokes suddenly felt like tiny needles. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a text from her. "There's another set of speakers by the west entrance of the auditorium that needs to be moved. Thanks." Not even an emoji. It was like a system command. I took the unopened cup of iced tea, still beating with cold sweat, and shoved it into a nearby trash can. It made a dull thud. For the next few days, I started actively avoiding her. I'd wait an extra 10 minutes before going downstairs for breakfast. As expected, Clara wasn't there. The heavy bag of food was left with the RA, who told me, "Try not to be late next time, dear." At 7 in the evening, I went to the old, slightly run-down library on the north side of campus. It was quieter and less crowded. I didn't get a single message from her all night. On Friday, in the dining hall, I took my tray and deliberately walked past our usual corner, squeezing into a noisy table in the middle of the room. Suddenly, a hand tapped my shoulder. Not too hard, not too soft. I instinctively turned around. Clara was standing behind me, holding a tray with a small portion of sweet and sour pork, something I'd never seen her eat, and a carton of yogurt. "Why are you sitting here?" she asked, her brow furrowed slightly. "It's lively," I mumbled, sliding my tray over to make some room for her in the noisy, crowded space. She placed a carton of yogurt on the corner of my tray. "Here," she said flatly. Then she turned and walked away. Monday morning, second period. Data structures. I was slumped over my desk in the back row, trying to sleep off a weekend of late-night gaming. In a half-conscious daze, I felt someone sit down in the empty seat next to me. They brought a familiar, faint, clean scent with them. My eyes shot open. All sleepiness vanished. I sat up straight. Clara was actually sitting next to me in the aisle seat. On her desk was a data structures textbook that had absolutely nothing to do with her major. Clara, my voice was raspy. Everyone around us, including the old professor fiddling with the projector at the front of the room, turned to stare. She turned her head, her expression unreadable. "The water is out in the humanities building," she stated, as if reporting the weather. "I came here to study." She didn't have a notebook. She didn't have a pen. All she had was this textbook, which she'd apparently borrowed from some random freshman. She opened the book to the title page. The name, Mark Johnson, CS Class of 27, was scrawled across the top. Her pale fingers rested on the edge of the page, her posture poised and casual, as if this were the most normal thing in the world. She completely ignored the whispers and stares from the rest of the class. I was so tense, I couldn't focus on a single word of the lecture. The professor was talking about Stack Overflow. Clara's finger traced idle patterns on the blank margin of the borrowed textbook. The bell finally rang. I practically jumped out of my seat, frantically stuffing my book and laptop into my bag. Clara closed the borrowed textbook with unhurried grace and joined the stream of students heading for the door. Just as we were about to exit the classroom, she paused. In a single, fluid motion, before I even knew what was happening, she leaned in. Her cool fingertips brushed against the back of my hand as she casually pushed the sleeve of my hoodie, which had slipped down, back up to my elbow. The soft sound of fabric sliding. The touch of her skin was as light and as fast as her movement. It was there and gone in an instant. It was as natural as brushing a piece of lint off a sleeve. "Your sleeve," she said, her voice perfectly calm. Then, as if nothing had happened, she walked out of the classroom. I was left frozen in the crowded doorway. The small patch of skin on the back of my hand where her fingers had touched tingled with a strange, lingering warmth, like it had been zapped by a faint electric current. That sudden, fleeting moment of physical contact was like a stone dropped into a still pond. It wasn't a huge splash, but it sent out silent, ever-widening ripples through the rest of my day. That evening in the dining hall, I stared down at the eggplant on my plate, but all I could see was that moment from class replaying in my head. The faint, clean scent of soap as she leaned in. The electric jolt of her cool fingertips on my skin. The completely unfazed look in her eyes. Clink! The sound of my fork hitting the floor snapped me back to reality. As I bent down to pick it up, I caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye. 2 tables over, at a table by the window, Clara was sitting alone. Her food was untouched. She held her fork in her right hand, while her left arm rested casually on the edge of the table, propped up on a book. Her gaze wasn't on the book. It was fixed on her own left wrist. She was wearing a simple, white fitness tracker. A tiny blue light pulsed quietly on the small square screen. It looked like it was silently calculating some important cosmic measurement. Her fingertips traced the edge of the screen, her eyes glued to the flickering numbers. She was so focused, you would think she was staring into a constellation of stars, not a cold digital display. Was she taking her pulse? Monitoring her heart rate? The voice of her friend, the one with the bunny ears, echoed in my head. Test subject. 3-step method. I shot up straight, my plastic fork now slightly bent from my grip. Whatever fragile thing had been stirred up by that brief touch sank back down, landing hard and heavy at the bottom of a cold, dark pit. Test data. All she needed was clean, recordable data that would serve her so-called practical application theory. As for how I felt, it probably mattered about as much as a blinking indicator light on a piece of lab equipment. At 10 o'clock that night, I walked into the library study hall, as usual, but I stopped dead in the doorway. In the back corner by the window, the spot I always sat in. The seat across from it was already taken. Clara was sitting there quietly. A thick, open notebook hid part of her face, but I knew it was her instantly. It was like a preset program. Even though I hadn't been there in days, that spot by the window was still reserved for her. A strange, undefinable sense of defiance washed over me. I turned on my heel and walked to an empty seat in the opposite corner next to the recycling bin. I sat down, unpacked my books, turned on my laptop. But my eyes kept drifting against my will across the rows of desks and through the motes of dust dancing in the lamplight to that corner. Clara hadn't moved. Her head was slightly bowed, a few stray strands of hair falling across her forehead, hiding her eyes. The hand holding her pen was hovering over a blank page in her notebook. It stayed there, unmoving for a long time. Her fingertips were suspended in the air, casting a small, still shadow. It was like a scene from a silent film that had been paused. Everyone else in the library was quietly reading or writing. The only sound was the low hum of the ventilation system, which made her frozen corner seem even more stark and silent. After a few more minutes, she finally lowered her pen. She folded her hands on top of her notebook and lifted her head. Her gaze swept slowly, emotionlessly, across the entire study hall. It was like a high-tech scanner mapping its environment, inch by inch, until her eyes, passing over rows of desks and unsuspecting students, landed squarely on me. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I quickly dropped my gaze, pretending to be absorbed in the lines of code on my screen. But my heart, completely betraying me, skipped a beat. Then it started hammering against my ribs, the thumping sound seeming to echo in the cavernous silence of the room. My eyes were glued to the blinking cursor, but I couldn't read a single word. I could feel her stare. It was tangible, steady, focused. It felt like a physical pressure on the side of my face. I didn't look back. I just stared at my own blurry reflection in the laptop screen. My face felt hot. She stared at me for an unnervingly long time. Just as I was about to break, just as I was about to turn my head, I heard the faint scrape of a chair being pushed back. I fought the urge to look, using only my peripheral vision to catch a glimpse of a light blue figure getting up from the table. She gathered her book and notebook and walked toward the exit, without a single glance in my direction. Her silhouette disappeared behind the frosted glass door. Her footsteps faded down the hall. The tension in my back finally released. I let out a long breath. My palms were sweaty. I stared at my laptop screen, my earlier frustrated thoughts now roaring back to life. What was she observing just now? Was she evaluating my reaction to her little contact experiment and logging the resulting data? Was I just a slide under a microscope? That faint, stinging sensation in my chest returned, sharp and clear. It felt like a splinter buried too deep to be removed. This weird dance of avoidance and confrontation, this silent tug of war, went on for almost 2 weeks. I subconsciously avoided the places and times we were likely to cross paths. But she, like a perfectly coded program, continued to appear at her designated spots. Sometimes it was the bag of breakfast handed over by the RA at 7:10 a.m. Sometimes it was that seat across from my usual spot in the library. Even if she wasn't there, a thick textbook would be, silently and stubbornly claiming the territory as hers. Saturday afternoon was gray and overcast. Mac dragged me out to buy new sneakers. We had just walked off campus when the drizzle started, turning into a downpour without any warning. Fat raindrops hammered down, weaving into a dense curtain of water in seconds. Seriously? The weather app is a damn liar. Matt cursed. We made a run for it, ducking under the narrow awning of a 7-11. The awning was too short. Cold, slanting rain soaked the cuffs of our jeans. I pulled out my phone, intending to see if there was a drugstore nearby where we could buy an umbrella. As I looked up, my eyes focused through the rain-streaked glass window of the convenience store, and I saw her, sitting at a high-top counter by the window, a straight-back silhouette. She was wearing a light blue jacket and dark jeans, holding a cup of coffee in one hand. The fingers of her other hand were slowly scrolling on her phone. Her profile was slightly blurred by the condensation on the glass. It was Clara. Her eyes were lowered, focused on her screen. Her long eyelashes fluttered as her thumb moved. She seemed completely absorbed in her own world, totally unaware of the two guys getting soaked just across the street. "Hey, isn't that your sponsor?" Mac had seen her too. He nudged my shoulder. "What are you waiting for? Go say hi." Asked to borrow her umbrella. I didn't move. My eyes were glued to the gray backpack sitting on the empty stool next to her. Tucked into the mesh side pocket was a neatly folded, black, full-sized umbrella. The metal handle gleamed under the bright fluorescent lights of the store. Inside, the air was warm and dry. It was a different world from a miserable, cold rain outside. She clearly didn't need that umbrella. Was it just a habit to always be prepared? Or she glanced up, casually looking out the window at the relentless downpour. Her gaze swept over the scene like it was meaningless background noise. She looked away without a moment's hesitation, her attention returning to her phone. She didn't even pause on the miserable, shivering figures across the street. It was as if a thick, impenetrable barrier separated her bright, dry world from ours. She took a slow sip of her coffee, looking completely relaxed and comfortable. The black umbrella sat there, untouched, like a forgotten, useless tool. Mac was still talking. "Go on, man. Ask her. It's better than getting pneumonia out here." I tore my eyes away and looked down the street in the other direction, toward the gray buildings that were blurred into a single mass by the rain. "Forget it. The mall is just up ahead. We can run for it. They sell umbrellas there." My voice was harsh, laced with an irritation that surprised even me. Max stared at me. "Run. We'll be soaked." "Are you?" I didn't explain. I took a deep breath of the cold, metallic-smelling air and plunged headfirst into the hammering rain. The icy water instantly drenched my hair and my thin t-shirt, sending a chill straight down my spine. I didn't look back. I didn't slow down. I just ran my long strides, splashing through the puddles, heading for the distant, hazy silhouette of the shopping mall. The convenience store, the blurry figure behind the glass, the umbrella that might as well have not existed. I left them all behind in the sound of my pounding feet and the splashing water. That night, the fever hit. My head felt heavy, my limbs like lead. My throat was raw and scratchy, and my nose was so stuffed I could barely breathe. "Serves you right for trying to be a tough guy," Max said, tossing a box of cold medicine he'd gotten for the campus health center onto my desk. I drifted in a feverish sleep until the middle of the night. My phone, lying on the pillow next to me, started vibrating violently. The buzzing sound was piercing in the darkness. I fumbled for it with my eyes still closed. I squinted at the screen. 1:37 a.m. The caller ID said Clara Thompson. My brain was still foggy. Annoyed at being woken up, my first instinct was to hit decline, but my thumb hovered over the red button for a few long seconds. Then, for some reason I couldn't explain, I swiped green. "Hello," I mumbled, pressing the phone to my hot ear. My voice was as rough as sandpaper. The other end was silent for a few seconds. There was only a faint static hum. Her breathing was so shallow, I could barely hear it. "Clara," I said, my voice a little louder, which made my sore throat ache. "It's me." Her voice finally came through. Even over the phone, it had that same cool, crisp quality. "Yeah," I waited, but she fell silent again. Her breathing seemed to get just a little heavier. "Is there something you need?" I pushed, fighting the headache and the dizzying fog in my brain. The night outside was pitch black. The dorm hallway was dead silent. It felt like an eternity passed, though it was probably only 10 seconds. Then she spoke. "Your heart rate. What is it right now?" The question was so sudden, so out of left field, it was jarring. My fever-addled brain couldn't even begin to process her logic. My only response was pure instinct. "Clara, it's almost 2 in the morning. Did you seriously call me just to ask if I'm having heart palpitations?" My voice dripped with sarcasm. Another long, suffocating silence on the other end. Just when I decided she must have misdialed and was about to hang up, her voice came again, barely a whisper, like a gust of wind against a window pane. "No, She stopped, as if someone had cut her off. A few more seconds passed. Then she said just one word. "Never mind." Beep. The line went dead. The screen went dark. The room was silent again, except for my own ragged breathing and the sound of the wind outside. I held the cold phone in my hand. My head hurt even more. None of it made any sense. As dawn broke, the fever felt worse. I dragged myself out of bed to get some water and take my medicine. The booming voice of our RA echoed down the hall. "Room 603. Is Leo Hayes in 603 there? You've got a delivery." I leaned against the door frame as I opened the door. The RA was holding a heavy, insulated tote bag. "Here, your girlfriend dropped this off downstairs first thing this morning. She said to make sure you had it while it's hot." The bag was firm and warm to the touch. I frowned and unzipped it. The rich smell of food, mixed with the faint scent of herbs, wafted out. On top was a tightly sealed, double-layered thermos. I twisted it open. Steam rose from a thick, hot butternut squash and millet porridge. The sweet aroma was comforting. Underneath, there were two individually wrapped, still warm brioche buns, a peeled hard-boiled egg, and a few small containers of mild pickles. At the very bottom of the bag was an unopened box of Dayquil/NyQuil. Taped to the box was a small, yellow sticky note with slightly uneven edges. On it, in a clean, blocky, printed font, were 3 words, "Take as directed." The letters were so neat and impersonal, they looked like they had been generated by a computer. I stared at the food, then at the sterile, printed words on the note. The memory of the iced tea I had thrown in the trash, the umbrella sitting uselessly in the convenience store. It was like a block of ice being dropped into a pot of boiling water. There was a violent sizzle, and then nothing but scalding, suffocating steam. I zipped the bag shut. For the next few days, even after the fever broke, a hacking cough and a bone-deep weariness stuck to me like a shadow. My energy was completely gone, as if it had all been washed away in that sudden downpour. By deliberately avoiding the library and the dining hall, I managed not to run into Clara at all. The strange, silent push and pull between us seemed to have ended with my sickness. Friday afternoon, after my last class, I went up to a remote storage room on the top floor of the academic building. It was filled with old desks and chairs, a quiet place to study. I was planning to finish the last half of a textbook. I had just pulled out my book when the door creaked open. A thin sliver of light cut across the floor. A girl I'd never seen before, wearing a pink dress with her hair in 2 thin braids, peeked her head in. Her eyes were wide and a little nervous. "Excuse me, are you Leo Hayes?" "I am. Who are you?" I frowned. Almost no one ever came up here. The girl hurried over and placed a small, light green box tied with a pretty ribbon on the dusty desk in front of me. Her face was slightly flushed. Clara asked me to give this to you." She pointed at the box. She said it's a return gift for the iced tea. I froze. A return gift for the drink I threw away? The girl must have seen the confusion on my face because she quickly added, "She also had a message. She said it was very important that I tell you." She took a deep breath and, in a perfect imitation of Clara's flat, cool tone, recited, "Tell him this time, it's handwritten." After she said it, she seemed to find the whole thing a little strange herself. She suppressed a smile, gave me a little nod, and said, "My job is done. See ya." She scurried away like a startled bird. I stared at the box. There were no markings on it, just a pale green ribbon tied in a simple bow. I untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, there was no dessert or drink. There was just a neat stack of cream-colored index cards. The card on top was covered in writing. It was unmistakably Clara's handwriting, line after line of it. Every word was clear, but the writing itself, it was completely different from her usual, flawless script. The strokes were slightly shaky. The ink was uneven. In some places, you could see where the pen had paused, leaving a dark, blotted dot of ink. It looked like the writer's hand had been unsteady, or maybe they had been pressing down too hard. One card, then another. I counted them. There were 3 cards, completely filled with writing. The script wasn't perfect, but every single letter was there, clear as day. Leo, the term test subject, was coined by my roommate, Chloe, the girl in the bunny ears. She has a tendency for hyperbole. I have never considered this an experiment. The 3-step method was derived from a case study from my Intro to Psychology course. The topic was initial pathways to interpersonal attraction, the library seed. I required a stable, quiet environment to organize my materials. The dining hall location. It offered superior lighting and minimal acoustic interference, optimizing efficiency. The breakfast delivery. It was a promotional package from the small market near my dorm. A 1-month subscription was offered at a discount. The volume was non-refundable, and disposal would have been wasteful. Using your meal card. The mobile payment system was down that day. The cost of the meal was returned to your student account via the campus transfer system, plus a 10% stipend for the inconvenience. A screenshot of the transaction is attached. The shopping and equipment tasks. These were calculated with fair compensation in mind, either monetary or an equivalent value exchange. The input and output were balanced. The basketball court incident. My log showed that our physical proximity had been under the standard social distance of 50 centimeters for a cumulative 3 minutes and 28 seconds. I required more contact data to refine the core model of my elective thesis. The sleeve adjustment in the library. This was an attempt to learn and implement an effective nonverbal bridging signal via physical initiation. The goal was increased efficiency, not emotional disruption. The attempt is currently classified as a failure. The umbrella at the convenience store. By the time I left the premises, you were no longer at the location. I was able to ascertain your new coordinates at the mall via a social media post from your roommate. The umbrella's mass-to-utility ratio exceeded the threshold for necessary carry. It possessed no strategic value at that moment. Based on the above, all actions related to my three-step strategy practical application were focused exclusively on quantifiable data analysis. The objective was to collect variables and refine a theoretical model. The correlation to you as a specific, targeted individual was 0. Regarding the late-night phone call, I apologize. The improper timing of the communication attempt clearly resulted in a negative interference. My initial impetus was the detection of your absence from the fixed library coordinates for a period exceeding 72 hours. This data anomaly triggered an alert. A query of the public-facing campus transaction log revealed your purchase of acetaminophen and a multi-symptom cold relief product at the health center. A projection of potential physiological changes was made based on the product's active ingredients. Considering previously recorded instances of your delayed reaction times in the library, I attempted to understand the predictable impact of non-academic setting acute health events on subsequent behavioral patterns. The choice of a handwritten card as a return gift was based on Chloe's assertion regarding the threshold of perceived sincerity in external communication formats. I must recalibrate my preliminary assessment of the relationship between information delivery medium and credibility reception coefficient. Sincerely, Clara Thompson. At the very bottom of the last card, in tiny letters, she had added one more line. Handwriting duration, 1 hour, 52 minutes. Penmanship deviation from baseline exceeds acceptable tolerance. Will adjust postural support for future attempts. 3 cards covered in text. The writing was far from neat. There were even words crossed out and rewritten. The tone was still that of a cold, clinical analysis. She had dissected every event like a lab specimen, laying it out on the operating table of data, cost-benefit, model refinement, and interference thresholds. I read it over and over again. My eyes landed on that last little note about her hand getting tired, and the thick, heavy ice that had formed around my chest seemed to crack, just a little, under the pressure of a strange, new feeling. The next time I saw Clara was at dusk after a light summer rain. We were on the path that circled the campus lake. The sky was in that soft state between day and night, and a light mist was rising from the water. Another girl had her arm linked through Clara's. They were walking quickly, and Clara was listening intently to her friend, her expression as cool and focused as ever. The other girl was talking excitedly, gesturing with her free hand. Clara, her head tilted, would nod occasionally. The warm, yellow light from the lampposts filtered down through the wet leaves, dappling her face with moving spots of light. The moment I saw her, she happened to look up. Our eyes met, suddenly and unexpectedly, across the damp evening air. She stopped walking. The girl with her followed her gaze, looking at me with curiosity. She must have recognized me, because her expression immediately shifted to a knowing, gossipy smile. Clara said something quietly to her friend. The girl grinned, waved at me, patted Clara's shoulder, and unlinked their arms. She then walked on ahead by herself, leaving Clara standing there alone. We were about 20 feet apart. A stray raindrop fell from a leaf and hit the dark stone path at her feet with a soft pat. The tiny sound was startlingly clear in the twilight. She didn't move toward me. She didn't look away. She just stood there, her silhouette softened by the fading light and the glow of the lamp. I looked at her. I thought about the words crammed onto those cream color cards. I thought about her hand getting tired from writing. All that cold data, all those refined models. And that phone call at 1:30 in the morning, asking about my heart rate. My feet started moving, seemingly of their own accord. Step by step, I crossed the distance between us, my shoes splashing in the small puddles on the path. I stopped in front of her. The lamplight fell on us from above, casting a short, soft shadow from her eyelashes onto her cheeks. "Did you read the cards?" she asked. Her voice sounded a little dry in the cool, damp air. "I read them," I said. "Good," she replied. Her eyes darted briefly between my chin and my shoulder, not quite meeting my gaze, before finally settling on my face. She looked at me with that same intense focus, as if she were performing some kind of complex calculation. "Are there any more questions?" she asked. Her voice was still flat, but there was a new, almost imperceptible tension in it, like the hum of a tightly wound string. "One," I said, holding her gaze. The lamplight reflected in her dark pupils like shattered diamonds. "All that data," I said, speaking each word slowly. "The heartbeats, the distances, the times. Was it all really just data to you?" She clearly wasn't expecting such a direct question. Her pupils contracted for a split second. She was silent for a few moments. The fingers of her hand, hanging at her side, curled unconsciously, grasping the fabric of her beige trench coat. "It was objective record-keeping," she said, her voice steady, but she looked away, her eyes finding a patch of wet, dappled leaves on the ground. "But," she paused, as if her internal processor were struggling with a new, unexpected variable. "The baseline fluctuations during the non-contact period exceeded projections by 25.8%. Her voice was softer now, almost a whisper, as if she were stating a conclusion to herself. After another second, she seemed to make a decision. She turned her head back, her eyes meeting mine again. She stared at me, her gaze focused and intense. "Your heart rate data. What is it right now?" "I have no idea," I answered honestly. My throat felt like it was full of sand. "It can be measured," she replied instantly, as if a long-awaited experiment had finally reached its most critical phase. There was a faint but unmissable hint of eagerness in her voice. "I have." She looked down and began to unbutton her coat, reaching into the pocket of the thin cardigan she wore underneath. Her fingers emerged with a small, white, square device, the same fitness tracker I'd seen in the library. The screen was dark. She swiped it awake with a quick flick of her thumb. "Or," she said, looking up at me, her expression a mixture of pure focus and something else I couldn't name. "Would you consent to manual data collection via physical contact? The margin of error may be smaller." She had given me the choice, but then she took another small step forward, closing the already short distance between us. We were so close now, I could see the faint blush the cold air had brought to the tip of her nose. The clean, cool scent of her was stronger, like a soft, static-charged breeze against my skin. My heart felt like it had been squeezed tight, then suddenly released. It started pounding against my ribs. I swallowed hard. I didn't back away. Instead, I leaned in slightly. "I consent." My voice was a little hoarse, but it was perfectly clear in the evening air. She seemed to react to my straightforward permission. Her eyes, which were shockingly bright, blinked once. It was like a command had been executed. Her cool fingertips were already moving toward my chest. Her movements were efficient, her objective clear, driven by the pure, detached passion of a researcher for their data. But just as her fingers were about to make contact with my t-shirt, right over my heart, she flinched, as if she'd been hit by a sudden jolt of electricity. Or maybe it was just the thunderous, frantic beating of my own heart. Her wrist deviated from its intended path at a minuscule angle. It didn't land on my chest. It shifted upward by an inch, and her warm fingertips pressed, without any warning, against the side of my neck, right over my pulse. Her skin was much cooler than mine. The sudden contact sent a shiver through me. My heart hammered like a runaway engine, the frantic beat vibrating through my carotid artery, right into her fingertips. Time seemed to stop. The only sound was the pat of leftover raindrops falling from the leaves, landing just outside the circle of lamplight we stood in. Her fingers didn't move. She seemed stunned by the violent, rapid rhythm she felt, frozen in place. Her eyes were wide, her pupils reflecting the hazy night and my own tense jawline. Then, as if she'd been burned, her fingers recoiled. She snatched her hand back from my neck, and in the dim light, her pale cheeks bloomed with a faint but undeniable blush. It spread, all the way to the tips of her ears. Her breath caught in her throat. She looked like a complex program that had just received a corrupted, unprocessable line of code. The data stream was jammed. That suspicious blush on her cheeks deepened. She pressed her lips together. But then her hand, which had dropped to her side, lifted again. This time, there was a stubborn determination in the movement. Her fingertips, trembling slightly, recalibrated their trajectory and aimed with unwavering resolve for my heart once more. Her movement was fast, almost desperate. The soft pads of her fingers pressed through the thin cotton of my t-shirt, landing precisely on the left side of my chest, right where the frantic beating was the strongest. Thump! It felt like an invisible fist had slammed into my sternum. And then the frantic pounding got even faster. Through the thin layer of fabric, the warmth of her hand and the violent thudding of my heart were transmitted without any barrier. It was so clear it was breathtaking. Her fingers seemed to be pinned there by the force of it, unable to pull away. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the warm glow of the lamp above and the soft mist rising from the lake behind us. All the detached, cool, data-driven control was gone. All that was left was a pure, overwhelming, helpless astonishment. And maybe just a hint of the soft, flowing current hidden beneath a frozen lake. Time stretched on, the silence broken only by the roaring in my ears. The fingers pressed against my chest curled slightly, a tiny tremor running through them. She lifted those clear, dark eyes and looked straight into mine. Her voice, when she spoke, was as soft as a raindrop in the night wind, a fragile, careful confirmation, right here. Her cool fingertips pressed just a little harder, as if to feel the rhythm that was about to break through my ribs. "Are you breaking the speed limit?"